Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2019 album review. And today we're going to be looking into the new album from the band Thy Art Is Murder, entitled Human Target, which came out today through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Thy Art Is Murder, they're a deathcore band hailing all the way from Sydney, Australia, and these guys have been around since 2006. I discovered Thy Art Is Murder probably around 4 or 5 years ago. And I just heard them and I was like, what the hell is this? And they just sounded really sick. Like going back to like their very first album, which came out in 2010, I believe, called The Adversary or something. It was around that time where they had different vocalists and stuff, and it was just deathcore. But then we go into 2012 with the release of their album Hate, which in my opinion is probably my favorite album of theirs, which I think is just it's a deathcore album, but with that album, I feel like they kind of like went with more death metal feel. I mean, Thy Art, especially with like Holy War and their last album, they have the deathcore stuff, but they just sound more death metal than anything. It's just, they're ridiculous. And then we go into Holy War, which came out in 2015, which I think that was a pretty good album. But it was around that time, like near the end of that album, where they had CJ McMahon from Hate, then Holy War, but then it was a brief time for about a year where he left the band. But it wasn't until near the beginning of 2017 where he actually rejoined it, and I was like, yeah, and I was really stoked. And then their last album, which came out in 2017, which was called Dear Desolation, which I thought was a great album, but probably one of my favorites. But here we are with the release of their fifth full-length album, Human Target, and does this live up to or exceed what Dear Desolation has? In my opinion, it definitely has. Thy Art can do no wrong. Especially, I feel like with their albums, they just get better and better. Like they have, like I said, there are a lot of people would label them as deathcore, but they just sound more death metal than anything. Like I said, they have the deathcore elements, but they're ridiculous. And one thing to note, let's just talk about the vocals from CJ McMahon. Like his vocals are just really insanely good. Like just like his growls, I feel like it's just got more like powerful, and just like his yells and everything is just great. Great. I feel like he's one of the best deathcore vocalists I've heard. The guitar wise, Andy Marsh and Sean DeLander's guitar playing is just, the riffs they come up with is great. They're just tight on, is really great. Bass wise is pretty audible. The bass, you can hear it definitely well. I mean Kevin Butler definitely stepped it up on here. And drumming wise, this is actually the first album with a new drummer, Jesse Baylor. I believe he played in Black Crown Initiate. I can't even remember. He pretty much replaced Lee Stanton. And usually the drumming is like the hardest part, one of the hardest parts to fill in the band. But I feel like Jesse does a really great job with this album, especially the first album with the band. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is the title track of the album, Human Target, and it immediately begins crushing heads. And the intro is kind of like dairy deathcore, and CJ just sounds like very just possessed like Satan himself, and his vocals are absolutely incredible. Focusing on those vocals will show that CJ really does have an expressive voice, one with many nuances that slip by if you're really to the band as some of its parts and not individually. And the track is like 3.5 minutes of just pure unadulterated heaviness. And then we go into the next song on the album, which is called New Gods, which is a death metal mastery with the only lightest hint of deathcore involved. And personally, I feel like I really hope that like Thy Art Is Murder just continues to write music that is in its vein. And this shit is fucking heavy and brutally so, and it doesn't sound like their deathcore peers quite as much as before. And everything about New Gods crushes, and like the lyrics, the music, the presentation, the performance, and the whole 9 yards. It's just one of my favorites off the album. And then we go into Death Squad Anthem, and I'm really loving the guitar tone in the introduction and a buzzing that hangs like a promise of suffering, and tuning like Thy Art's laser focus from its ills of social media to the ills of war, which the sirens wail in A Blood Is Promise. Next up is Make America Hate Again, and the title itself is like a play of the modern day plague of the red baseball caps, the slogan Make America Great Again, which is like pretty much with like Donald Trump's presidency. And one thing that has really been noticeable in these new Thy Art songs is how venomous and aggressive the band are, and they're just no holding back. And I feel like lyrically just like talk about like global politics and even like religion and stuff is like pretty much what Thy Art is known for. Anyway, moving on to the next song on here, which is Eternal Suffering. With its blast beats, almost has like a little bit of elements of like black metal and sort of like a deathcore power. And there is also a great deal of diversity in this track, which adds like dynamics that aren't always as present as they are on this track. And the death metal feel is still present, but this is feels like it's a deathcore song overall. But it's a very good one at that. Welcome Oblivion, which begins with a quote about cancer from a Christopher Hitchens, planting the assumption that the theme will bleed into the rest of the song. And just when you think you've landed upon a horrifying dark song, Thyard just keeps up the end to you. Like, here is one of the topics that is unquestionably dark, that like the idea of cancer is like a blind, emotionless alien that uses humans as a host until you die or even manage to outlive it. Next up is Atonement, which a lighter moment arrives with it, and just like layers of guitar filter down and before these demons land callously and aggressively. And the song is ridiculously punishing, and I can barely hear the melody that's going on underneath the thick heaviness. More sparse to the verses, and CJ details something that seems like another kind of eternal war, but with the self instead of cancer, one's own demons. And I take Atonement as the experience of being lost in the grips of anxiety, where your lens is clouded by fear, doubt, paranoia, and how this can take over someone in their sleep or other vulnerable moments. It's abundantly clear that Thyard aren't being shy from away from like the worst experience of humanity. Voyeurs into Death, which is another standout track, and there's more than a few killer guitar parts and a nice blending of like deathcore and death metal is pretty heard on this. And as per their norm, this is a blistering track with all the elements that their fans, new and old, have come to and expect from this Australian powerhouse. Eye for an Eye, which is increasingly punishing of sound, seeming like Thyard has deliberately got us to let our guards down to enjoy a full impact as this is like a progressively grew, and the flame with disaster wiping the slate clean, clearly expressed as our blood shall nourish the fields of crimson and rust eaten to dust. And this song seems to portray the idea of a vengeful planet, or is it a vengeful god, that lies patient and just waits to wreak havoc. And if tension isn't created into a T, then I just adore this song, especially around the 3.5 minute mark, which has like a heart-wrenching tragic feels, and it's just soaring tones along with like layers of heaviness, as they say. And then we go into the final song on the album, which is Chemical Christ. And my initial thought was, how does one end an album like this? And it ends with like ridiculous drumming, that's how it ends, rhythmically punching, and like the ears feel like gunfire at first, and it feel like Chemical Christ hits home with questions towards those of lethal addictions to self-prescription, huge and steady, and these punches foreshadow a shift into high gear, and around the 2.5 minute mark, it's just a repetitive like parts of like intensity arrives that feel ominous nonetheless. And I'm left undecided if it's making a moment of sorrow or announcing a disaster to come, and the answer kind of seems like a bit of both. But yeah, great way to end the album. Now overall, Human Target by Thyard Is Murder is a really great album. Like, I feel like Thyard just gets better and better with each album. But sorry to give this album a score, I'm probably going to give this album probably a solid 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. So yep, that's my view of Human Target, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.